You can't do anything." Mom laughed, the sound sharp and brittle in the luxury bridal suite. The champagne flute in her hand didn't even tremble. She looked at me like I was a stain on the white carpet, something inconvenient but ultimately powerless. I didn't argue, I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I just reached into my bag. My fingers brushed the cool, crisp paper of the warrant I had printed hours ago. "Don't worry about what happens next," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. Amid their laughter, a deafening noise shook the lodge. The heavy oak doors splintered inward. The music died instantly. When they saw who entered next, the laughter stopped forever. Drop a comment below. If your family stole from you on their wedding day, would you ruin the party to get justice or wait until it was over? I want to know where you draw the line. 2 days before the doors were kicked in, the only noise in Aspen was the wind. It howled through the valley, sealing the luxury lodge in a cage of ice and white silence. The venue was beautiful in the way a diamond is beautiful, cold, hard, and prohibitively expensive. Brittany had chosen it for the aesthetic, but I knew she'd chosen it for the isolation. Once we were up here, there was no leaving. We were trapped in her perfect frozen kingdom. I stood at the check-in desk, my credit card already in the concierge's hand. This was my role. I wasn't the sister. I was the wallet. I was the silent partner in the business of Brittany's happiness. "We need a card for incidentals," the concierge said, smiling the polished smile of someone who knows the bill will be enormous. I nodded. I didn't flinch. I'd been trained for this moment since I was 6 years old. That's the thing about families like mine, they don't start with theft. They start with sharing. They start with be the bigger person. They condition you to view your boundaries as selfishness and your exploitation as love. I watched my card slide through the reader. I told myself I was being a good sister. That was the lie I used to survive. Later that night, the real trap was set. I was unpacking in my room, a room smaller than the closet in the bridal suite, when Brittany barged in. She didn't knock. She never knocked. She held her phone out like a weapon. "You need to download this," she said. "No hello. No thank you for the flight." "What is it?" I asked, looking at the screen. It was a vendor portal app, something high-end venues use to manage payments for catering, flowers, and music in real time. "It's for emergencies," she said, her voice tight with that frantic bridezilla edge she'd been honing for months. "Trevor's cards are maxed out because of the deposits. Mom's card got declined at the florist. I need you to link your account as the backup, just in case the band demands overtime or we need more champagne." I hesitated. My stomach tightened, a primal warning signal I'd ignored for decades. "Brittany, I've already paid for the flight, the hotel, and the rehearsal dinner. I can't just give you open access to my checking account." Her face crumpled. It was a performance I knew by heart. The lower lip trembled, the widening eyes. "It's just a backup, Alyssa. Do you want my wedding to be ruined because of a declined card? Do you want to embarrass me in front of Trevor's family? God, why do you always make everything about money?" I looked at her. I didn't see a sister. I saw a pattern. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance, the mental stress of holding two contradictory beliefs. For years I believed my family loved me, but I also knew they only called when they needed cash. To resolve the stress, I had convinced myself that their taking was a form of bonding. I told myself that paying their bills was my way of earning my seat at the table. If I stopped paying, I stopped existing to them. I wasn't downloading an app. I was paying a ransom. I was buying 48 hours of peace. I was paying the Keep Brittany Quiet tax, a levy I'd been subject to my entire adult life. "Fine," I said. The word tasted like ash. I downloaded the app. I entered my routing number. I linked it directly to my primary savings account. "You're the best," she said, her mood snapping back to sunny instantly. She hugged me, but she didn't squeeze. She just leaned in, checked the screen to make sure the confirmation checkmark appeared, and pulled away. "I knew I could count on you." She left the room, the door clicking shut behind her. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding my phone. It felt heavy in my hand, like a loaded gun I had just handed to a toddler. Outside, the snow kept falling, burying the roads, burying the exits, locking us in together. I told myself it would be fine. I told myself they wouldn't dare. But deep down in the part of my brain that deals with survival, I knew the safety catch was off. I just didn't know when they would pull the trigger. The reception was a masterclass in expensive taste. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the exposed wooden beams, casting a warm, golden glow over 300 guests who were busy eating lobster and pretending to like each other. The air smelled of expensive perfume and prime rib. I sat at the family table, nursing a glass of sparkling water, watching Trevor raise his champagne flute. He was giving a speech about partnership, about how marriage was a bond that couldn't be broken. He looked polished, charming, and completely at ease. My phone buzzed against the table. It wasn't a text vibration. It was the distinct urgent pattern I'd set for high-priority banking alerts. I didn't panic. In my line of work, panic is a liability. Panic deletes logs. Panic misses details. I slid the phone into my lap, shielding the screen from my mother, who was sitting next to me, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. I unlocked the screen. The notification was a single red banner across the top of my banking app. Withdrawal alert, $21,600. I stared at the number. It wasn't a round sum. It was specific. It was calculated. That wasn't an incidental charge for extra appetizers. That was a car. That was a down payment on a house. That was the majority of my liquid savings. I tapped the notification, drilling down into the transaction details. My forensic training kicked in automatically. I didn't feel the betrayal yet. I just felt the need for data. Merchant Apex Consulting, LLC. Time 8:42 p.m. Authorized via Vendor Portal API. User ID T. Groomvuitantavwheat. Trevor. I looked up at the head table. Trevor was laughing at something his best man had whispered. He didn't look like a man who had just committed grand larceny. He looked like a man who had just solved a very expensive problem. I looked at Brittany. She was glowing, basking in the adoration of the room. She caught my eye. I held up my phone, just slightly tapping the screen. Her smile faltered. She looked down at her own device, which was sitting next to her wine glass. I sent a text. One line. 21,000. Explain. Now. I watched her read it. I watched the annoyance flicker across her face, tightening the corners of her eyes. She didn't look shocked. She didn't look worried. She looked inconvenienced. She typed a reply and set the phone face down with a sharp click. My phone buzzed again. Stop checking your bank app. Seriously, it's a wedding gift. Trevor had a thing come up. Don't ruin the vibe, Alyssa. We'll talk about it Monday. A gift. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had rebranded the theft as generosity. They had decided that my money was theirs by right of proximity. They truly believed that because I was single, because I was family, my savings were a community chest they could raid whenever their own irresponsibility caught up with them. Is everything okay, dear? Mom asked, leaning in. You look pale. I'm fine, I said. My voice was steady. Just checking the schedule. Put the phone away, she whispered, patting my hand. Enjoy the moment. Your sister worked so hard for this. I looked at my mother. I looked at the diamond bracelet on her wrist, a gift I had bought her for her 50th birthday. I looked at the flowers I had paid for. I looked at the sister who was currently ignoring me to take a selfie. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, metallic click of a lock engaging. They thought they had me trapped. They thought the social pressure of the wedding, the snow outside, and the family-first indoctrination would keep me silent. They were banking on my shame. They were betting that I would be too embarrassed to cause a scene, that I would swallow the loss just to keep the peace like I always did. They were wrong. I wasn't the sister anymore, I was the creditor, and the bill was due immediately. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my dress. Where are you going, Mom? Asked, frowning. They're about to cut the cake. I need some air, I said. I walked out of the ballroom. I didn't look back at the head table. I didn't look back at the lie. I walked straight toward the heavy glass doors leading to the balcony, stepping out into the freezing aspen night. The cold air hit my lungs like a shot of adrenaline. I didn't shiver. I pulled my phone out again, but this time I wasn't checking my balance. I was opening my contacts. I scrolled past Mom, past Dad, past Brittany. I stopped on a name I hadn't called in months, but one I knew would answer on the first ring. Nathan. The balcony was a shelf of ice suspended over the valley. The wind up here didn't just blow. It bit. It gnawed at exposed skin, numbing my fingers and stinging my eyes. I welcomed it. The physical pain was grounding. It was cleaner than the mess inside. I pressed the phone to my ear. 1 ring. 2. Alyssa. Nathan's voice was low alert. He didn't sound like a friend picking up a casual call on a Saturday night. He sounded like an operative waiting for a signal. I need you to run a merchant ID, I said. No hello. No pleasantries. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat, metallic, stripped of all the soft inflections I usually use to make people comfortable. Go, he said. I could hear the faint click of a keyboard in the background. Apex Consulting, LLC. Transaction time 8:42 p.m. Amount 21,600. Authorized via the Aspen Lodge vendor portal. Give me 30 seconds. I stood there watching the snow swirl into the black void below. Inside through the thick glass I could see the blur of motion. The DJ had started the dancing. Brittany was in the center of the floor, her dress spinning around her, Trevor's hands on her waist. They looked perfect. They looked like a magazine cover. They looked like criminals. Alyssa Nathan's voice came back, cutting through the visual noise. You're secure. I'm alone. Apex Consulting isn't a vendor. It's a shell entity registered in the Cayman Islands. The routing number bounces through 3 different intermediaries before hitting a final holding account. It's a classic layering scheme. For what I asked, though, a cold knot was already forming in my stomach. Online sports betting, Nathan said. High stakes, unregulated, the kind of site that doesn't offer credit. You pay up front or you don't play. Or in this case, you pay your debts before they break your legs. The puzzle pieces slammed together with a violent clarity. Trevor. The tension I'd seen in his jaw during the rehearsal dinner. The way he kept checking his phone under the table. He hadn't stolen my money to pay for extra champagne or flowers. He had stolen my life savings to pay off a bookie before the reception ended. It's wire fraud, I said. The words hung in the freezing air. It's federal wire fraud, Nathan corrected. Cross-border transaction. Unauthorized access device. The amount exceeds the felony threshold. Alyssa, if I flag this, it triggers an automatic freeze. The Bureau's algorithms are already watching that shell company. If I tag your transaction as fraudulent, it lights up the whole board. He paused. He knew what he was asking. He was asking if I was ready to burn my family to the ground. I looked back through the window. My mother was laughing now, holding a glass of wine I had paid for. Brittany was whispering something in Trevor's ear, and he was smiling the relieved, arrogant smile of a man who thinks he got away with it. They didn't see me. To them, I was already gone. I was just a resource they had tapped and discarded. They banked on my silence. They banked on the fact that family matters are handled with whispers and forgiveness. But this wasn't a family matter anymore. It was a felony. I closed my eyes. I tried to find the sister who used to build blanket forts with Brittany. I tried to find the daughter who wanted her mother's approval. They weren't there. In their place was a forensic analyst who looked at a crime scene and saw only evidence. Light it up, I said. Are you sure? Nathan asked. Once I push this, I can't pull it back. The local field office will get a ping. They're already in the area for other reasons. Do it, I said. Flag the transaction. Report the fraud. Done, Nathan said. The keyboard clattered one last time. I'm 10 minutes out, Alyssa. I was already heading your way. Why? I'll explain when I get there. Stay on the balcony. Don't engage them yet. Nathan. Yeah. Thank you. Don't thank me, he said, his voice grim. Just hold the line. The call ended. I lowered the phone. My hands weren't shaking anymore. The cold had seeped into my bones, turning my blood into ice water. I watched the party for another minute, like a scientist observing a specimen in a jar. They were dancing on a landmine, and I had just handed the detonator to the FBI. I turned away from the glass and waited for the headlights. I didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, a black SUV cut through the snowfall, its headlights slicing 2 parallel beams into the darkness. It didn't pull up to the main valet stand where the high-end sedans were parked. It drove straight onto the service road that ran beneath my balcony, crunching over the ice with the heavy, authoritative weight of a government vehicle. The driver's side door opened. Nathan stepped out. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a tactical jacket over a dark sweater, his breath pluming in the frigid air. He looked up, locked eyes with me, and nodded once. I left the balcony, moving through the service corridor to meet him at the side entrance. The lodge was a labyrinth of stone and timber designed to keep the guests cozy and the reality out. I moved through the shadows, feeling like a ghost in a castle I had paid for. When I opened the side door, the wind tried to force its way in, but Nathan blocked it. He stepped inside, shaking snow from his shoulders. He looked at me, really looked at me, scanning for damage. You okay? He asked. I'm out $21,000, I said, so no. You're not out anything, he said. Not yet. That transfer is frozen in the clearinghouse buffer. We caught it. We, I asked. You said we. And you said you were already in the area. Nathan, what is going on? He motioned for me to follow him deeper into the alcove, away from the prying ears of the catering staff. He pulled a tablet from his jacket. The screen was dense with data network graphs, transaction flows, and a profile picture that made my stomach turn. Trevor. I couldn't tell you before, Nathan said, his voice low. Conflict of interest. Operational security. But since you're now a victim in an active case, I can read you in. He tapped the screen. We've been building a case against an online money laundering ring operating out of Denver for 8 months. They use high-stakes sports betting to clean cash for cartel operations. Trevor isn't just a gambler, Alyssa. He's a mule. I stared at the screen. My brother-in-law. The man who had toasted to family values an hour ago. He washes money through his real estate shell companies, Nathan continued, but he got greedy. He started skimming off the top to place his own bets. He lost big. The syndicate gave him a deadline pay up by midnight tonight or they liquidate his assets, and by assets I mean his knees. So he stole from me to save himself, I said. It was pathetic. It was desperate. It's worse than that, Nathan said. He looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and professional intensity. Alyssa, do you remember 6 months ago when I updated the cybersecurity protocols on your accounts? When I installed that tracker for your portfolio? I nodded. You said it was standard protection because of my job. It wasn't standard, he said. I tagged your digital assets. I watermarked every dollar in your savings with a digital tracer. We suspected Trevor might try to access family accounts to layer his payments. We figured he'd go for your parents first, but their credit is shot. You were the only clean source of liquidity left. The room seemed to tilt. You used me as bait. I used you as a tripwire, he corrected gently. I didn't think he'd actually do it. I hoped he wouldn't. But I had to be sure that if he did touch your money, we could track it instantly to the syndicate's master account. That's how we take down the whole network. I leaned against the rough stone wall. The betrayal had layers. Trevor hadn't just stolen my money. He had walked into a federal trap. And Brittany knew, I whispered. It wasn't a question. Nathan hesitated, then nodded. We have wiretaps on Trevor's phone. She's been coaching him on how to get access to your vendor portal for weeks. She knew about the debt. She knew about the deadline. She justified it by telling him you could afford the hit and that they'd pay you back after the wedding gifts were cashed. The air left my lungs. My sister didn't just enable a thief. She married a launderer and conspired to defraud me to cover his tracks. The emergency app, the guilt trips, the don't ruin the vibe text, it was all part of the operation. They viewed me as a resource to be harvested. So that money, I said, pointing toward the ballroom where the bass was thumping through the floorboards. That $21,000 is federal evidence, Nathan said. By transferring it, Trevor just handed us the link we needed to connect him directly to the offshore accounts. He didn't just commit grand larceny, Alyssa. He committed wire fraud and money laundering using marked funds. He's done. I looked at the tablet again. I saw the timestamps. I saw the web of lies my family had spun around me tightening with every, I love you, we're family, every request for help. What happens now? I asked. Nathan put the tablet away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. The local field office is 5 minutes out. They have a warrant for Trevor's arrest and a search warrant for the premises to secure his devices. But I need you to do something first. What? He handed me the paper. It was a copy of the warrant affidavit. You need to go back in there. You need to be the one to serve this. Not legally, the agents will do that, but symbolically. They need to know that this didn't happen to you. It happened because of you. I took the paper. It felt heavier than the phone, heavier than the guilt I had carried for years. They're going to hate me, I said. Mom, Dad, Brittany. They'll say, I destroyed the family. The family was destroyed the minute they decided you were a target instead of a person, Nathan said. You're just signing the death certificate. I looked at him. He was right. The sister I loved was an illusion. The mother I tried to please was a ghost. The only real thing left was the law. I straightened my dress. I checked my reflection in the darkened window of the side door. I didn't look like a victim anymore. I looked like the person holding the pen. Let's go, I said. I turned and walked back toward the ballroom. The music was getting louder. They were playing a love song. It was time to stop the music. I pushed open the heavy oak doors to the bridal suite. The room smelled of expensive lilies and stale champagne. They were all there, Brittany, Trevor, Mom, Dad, lounging on the plush velvet sofas like royalty holding court. They weren't dancing. They were celebrating the real victory, the successful extraction of my future, to pay for their present. When I walked in, the laughter didn't stop immediately. It trailed off slow and lazy, the way people look at a waiter who has interrupted a toast. You're back, Mom said. She didn't look concerned. She looked bored. She swirled her glass, the diamonds on her wrist catching the light. Did you finish your little tantrum? I wasn't having a tantrum, I said. My voice was calm. It wasn't the calm of peace, it was the calm of a sniper adjusting a scope. I was checking my balance. Trevor smirked. He was loosening his tie, his face flushed with the adrenaline of having gotten away with it. Alyssa, give it a rest. We told you we'll pay you back when the market turns. Stop being so dramatic. I'm not waiting for the market, I said. And I'm not waiting for you. I reached into my bag. What are you going to do? Mom laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. She looked at me with a pity that made my skin crawl. Call the police. On your sister's wedding day, you wouldn't dare. You care too much about what people think. You can't do anything. I looked at her, really looked at her, and suddenly I understood. Psychologists talk about the illusion of power. It's common in narcissists who rely on others to fund their lifestyle. Mom didn't have power, she had leverage. Her authority wasn't built on respect or achievement. It was built on the assumption that I would always pay the bill. She thought she was untouchable because she was holding my wallet. She didn't realize that her entire status, the jewelry, the venue, the arrogance, was a rental. She was a tenant in a life I was paying for, and I was evicting her. You're right, I said softly. I can't do anything, but they can. I pulled the folded warrant affidavit from my bag and dropped it onto the coffee table. It landed with a soft slap that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. What is this? Dad asked, reaching for it. Don't worry about what happens next, I said. Before he could read the first line, the world ended. It started with a noise so loud it felt less like sound and more like a pressure wave hitting my chest. Boom. The service doors to the suite splintered inward wood flying across the room. Federal agents. Hands. Show me your hands. The screaming started instantly. Mom dropped her glass. It shattered on the floor, red wine spraying like blood across the white hem of Brittany's dress. Dad froze the paper, trembling in his hand. Trevor tried to run a pathetic, instinctive lunge toward the balcony, but he didn't make it 3 steps. 2 agents in tactical gear swarmed him, slamming him face first into the carpet. Trevor Davis, you are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. The words were shouted, practice lethal. The room filled with uniforms. Nathan walked in behind them, calm amidst the chaos, holstering his weapon. He looked at me and nodded. Brittany was screaming, a high, thin sound of pure terror. What is happening, Trevor, Mom? Do something. Mom was backed against the wall, her hands raised her face, a mask of shock. The arrogance was gone. The illusion of power had evaporated, the second the reality of consequences kicked in the door. Without my money to shield them, without the social contract of family, to protect them, they were just people in expensive clothes breaking the law. An agent hauled Trevor up. His nose was bleeding. His tuxedo was torn. He looked at me, his eyes wide with betrayal. Alyssa, tell them it was a loan. Tell them you authorized it. I looked at him. I looked at the handcuffs biting into his wrists. I didn't authorize a transfer to a money laundering shell company, I said. And I certainly didn't authorize you to use my savings to traffic federal evidence. Alyssa Brittany rushed toward me, grabbing my arm. Her grip was desperate, her nails digging into my skin. Fix this. You have to fix this. It's a misunderstanding. Just tell them it's okay. Tell them to stop. I looked at my sister, the golden child, the bride. She was begging me to save her just like she always did. Just like she did with the app. Just like she did with the credit card bills. She thought this was just another mess I could clean up with a checkbook and an apology. I gently peeled her fingers off my arm. I can't fix federal indictments, I said. You did this, Mom shrieked, finding her voice. You called them. You ruined your sister's life over money. No, I said, turning to walk out. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped paying for the cover-up. I walked out of the suite past the agents, securing the evidence, past the shattered remnants of their perfect evening. I walked back out into the snow where the air was clean and cold, and the only thing I owed anyone was nothing. The silence that followed the raid was heavy, like the snow piling up against the windows. The lodge was empty now, save for the cleaning staff, nervously sweeping up broken glass and the remnants of a wedding cake that would never be cut. The federal agents had cleared out an hour ago, taking Trevor, a weeping Brittany, and my shell-shocked parents to the local field office for processing. I sat by the massive stone fireplace in the lobby watching the embers fade. The heat was dying down, but for the first time all weekend I felt warm. Nathan came back from the front desk, holding 2 mugs of black coffee. He sat down opposite me, stretching his legs out. He looked tired, but it was the good kind of tired, the fatigue of a job finished, a case closed. The preliminary report is in, he said, his voice low in the cavernous room. Trevor is being held without bail. Flight risk. The Bureau seized his accounts, his assets, and his electronics. And my parents, I asked. I didn't feel a pang of worry. I just wanted the data. They're not being charged, yet Nathan said, but they co-signed 3 of Trevor's business loans to help him expand. When the Fed seize his assets, the banks are going to call those notes. Your parents are looking at total bankruptcy. The house, the cars, the country club membership, it's all going to be liquidated to pay the government. I nodded. It was a mathematical certainty. They had leveraged their entire existence on the illusion of Trevor's wealth. Now that the illusion was gone, the math was correcting itself. They'll blame me, I said. Let them, Nathan replied. You can't hear them from here. I looked at him. He was right. I couldn't hear them. The constant noise of their demands, their guilt trips, their expectations, it was all gone. It had been replaced by the clean, quiet hum of a balanced ledger. I thought about the future. For years I had defined justice as getting even. I thought victory meant making them feel the pain they had caused me. But sitting there watching the firelight reflect in Nathan's eyes, I realized I had been aiming too low. There is a philosophy called the justice of the sower. It posits that true justice isn't about the punishment you inflict on the past. It's about the seeds you plant for the future. Punishing them was just the demolition phase. The real victory was what I was about to build on the empty lot they left behind. My victory wasn't their prison sentences or their bankruptcy. It was my freedom. It was the money in my account that was now safe. It was the career I had built. It was the man sitting across from me who respected my strength instead of trying to exploit it. I took my phone out of my pocket. I opened the family group chat. It was still active with messages from earlier in the night, photos of the cake, complaints about the cold, the last frantic text from Brittany begging me to fix it. I didn't scroll up. I didn't read them. I tapped the settings menu. Select all. Delete conversation. Block contacts. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. I didn't throw the phone into the fire. I just pressed a button. It was administrative. It was the final audit of a failed partnership. Ready to go, Nathan asked, standing up. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. We walked out of the lodge into the crisp, clean night. The storm had passed. The air was still. I didn't look back at the building. I didn't look back at the wreckage of the perfect day. I looked forward at the road ahead, cleared and waiting. They thought my silence was weakness, but it was just me gathering the receipts. Share this story if you've ever had to teach someone that kindness has a limit.